Alright guys, today we are going to be jumping down another Warlock build video for you. That quick little intro footage, I'm just over here at the moon. You know, easy spot to kind of showcase kind of what these builds do in lieu of drilling back into the campaign. I have already beaten the legendary campaign as a solo player. Definitely challenging, but today we're going to be focusing on this really nice arc build today. So that's what we're focusing on. And this is a build that I've tweaked a little bit over time and kind of gotten in a spot that I really like it. It does good work on both ad clear as well as single target, and kind of the setup for it is like you're just feeling like you constantly have your abilities up. It focuses heavily on these ionic traces being constantly up for use, which is the main facet of the build. And kind of the functionality of that is perks that allow these ionic traces to come up more often or have a higher chance to come up, and that is kind of the build around on at least how I do this specific ionic trace build. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. I've tweaked it over time, but I really feel quite good about how it functions in its current state. Really good at ad clearing, also good at getting abilities back up quite quickly. That's a perfect example right there. Got it up again and again and dropped the boss, no problem. So you can kind of see how this functions. Kind of one of the main cores is the aspect that allows you to do this, excuse me, not the Sith kind of lightning throw, but the slide and then drop lightning bolts. It's much easier when I have enemies in front because it constantly procs. I mean, at worst, its downtime is about 10 seconds when you're actually in the middle of a big group of enemies. But effectively, and you saw it, all you do is you run, you slide as you're sliding, you pull your melee, and it will drop a huge swath of lightning bolts on the ground in front of you, directly in front of the path that you slide. That's what it looks like. You blink. When you come up, you shoot this lightning, and it is absolutely gnarly for ad clear. Aside from the classic lightning grenade as well, always good. And then I've got a voltshot on this brigand sidearm from the Season of Plunder, which is quite nice. This is one that I crafted to put the top spec voltshot on it. Works very well indeed. And you'll see not only that, but you get a kill, you reload, you quickly pull it again, and then you can really start lightning chains off to tons of enemies. Tons of them. So we'll just come over here, we'll do a little lightning blast. May as well. Already got the ult up, and of course I did, because your powers are constantly up on this build. It's that simple. But that is the kit and caboodle. This is just a quick, dirty little bit of play just to kind of show you what it looks like. Put some damage on a target, quickly reload the pistol, and I've got perks to make it reload even quicker and quicker and quicker. So now let's go back to orbit, and I'm going to actually show you what the build is, what perks I have selected, what aspects, and kind of how this all synergizes. There's a lot of really fun arc builds for Warlock. One that I loved for a very long time, you'll see indeed I still have it on my person, is the Storm Dancer's Brace. That focuses around the ultimate ability, but it's one I think takes a back seat to this build. So I'm kind of going to first show you the setup. So on my build, Brigand's Law, my crafted Brigand's Law, this is kind of a core to my build, and you'll see that I have the upgraded version of Feeding Frenzy and Voltshot. So if you're unfamiliar with voltshot, that's a key to this build. Reloading this weapon after defeating a target overcharges that weapon for an improved short period of time, and it causes it to jolt on its next hit. Jolt is basically an arc stun. It does big damage, it does big stun. It can stop people from throwing abilities on you, and it basically buys you more time to clear ads or big bosses. It's fine. And you can use an ad, quickly reload, then jump back over to a boss and start putting fire on it. This is a very rapid fire sidearm. 450 RPM archetype, and I have an extended mag on it. My second perk is an enhanced version of Feeding Frenzy, so rapid final blows progressively increase the reload speed substantially for a short time. So if I'm just focusing ads and reloading ad focus shoot, ad focus shoot, ad focus shoot, this is just going to start reloading like crazy. Then the other side perk I have on this is right hook, so melee damage gives the weapon increased target acquisition and range, and dealing melee extends the effect. Since I am using my arc kind of blink melee power, this comes in handy a lot. Finally, just kind of the rest of the base setup. Tactical mag, better stability, reload speed, bigger magazine size in the corkscrew for range stability and handling. So yeah, that's my setup. This is kind of the key component weapon-wise to this build. But now we're going to jump over to the exotic piece that's with this build. Now this is one that I think popped up in the season before the season of the Plunder. I forget the name of the season, but it's the Warlock helmet exotic, the Fallen Sunstar. If you didn't get this when it dropped, just go find you one of the legendary lost sectors that tells you that it awards exotic helms, and to grind that until it drops. That's the easiest way to guarantee getting this. If you have most of the helms, it's going to come up pretty quickly. But the key to this piece is this perk, Ionic Conductor. Ionic traces you create move faster, grant you additional ability energy. Nearby allies also gain ability energy when you collect an ionic trace. So basically, the ionic traces are those little kind of electric, I don't know how to describe them, you know them when you see them. They kind of follow you. And you get those for performing different things as you're in battle. Those give you ability energy back. And this setup is built around proccing as many ionic traces as possible. So with this helmet, you get them more often, they travel faster, and they boost your teammates, as well as getting to you quicker to throw the energy back onto your abilities. Now, my actual setup for this build is Healing Rift on this one, Burst Glide always. I have the Ball Lightning Arc Projectile. That's like the quick little arc blast. I don't use that often because of this aspect over here. We'll get to that in a minute. But if it's on cooldown or you don't have a big group of enemies and you just want to throw the basic arc, this is still a good powerful one. The cooldown a minute 54, but the way this build works, your abilities are basically constantly up. It's not infinite quite like on the Solar Warlock builds, but it's near enough and up often enough that you feel really, really good while you're playing. And you can see here it tells you amplified. While amplified, it releases additional lightning strikes before detonating. And then, of course, as always on the left, if you're not sure what the terminology means, they'll tell you. Weapon handling and movement speed greatly increased. After sprinting for a while, your movement speed gets further increased, and then rapidly defeating targets with arc damage makes you amplified. So you can get faster, make weapon handling better, keep getting faster and better by amplifying, because we're basically sticking with that arc pistol the whole time that we're playing this build. The next thing, I have a Flux Grenade. That's got one of the longer cooldowns, but it's a sticky electric grenade. That's the meat and potatoes. So for the aspects, there's three, of course. The two that I choose are first the Lightning Surge. That's the one that if you're running and then you slide, and while you're in the middle of the slide, you pull your melee, you will blink forward and pop up with a big lightning blast AoE ability that does crazy, crazy damage, and it tells you exactly about it. While sliding, activate your charged melee to blink forward, calling down lightning strikes that jolt as you materialize. Now, again, Jolt, if you're not sure what that is another key component to this build, because that pistol I have also jolts targets. The target is energized with destructive art light on a jolt. They take additional damage while jolted and chain lightning to nearby targets. This also is good against overload champions. It will stun overload champions. So we're basically, if you were seeing all that crazy lightning chain that almost looked like the Trinity Ghoul bow, that's why. It's because of the jolting that I have on it with my craft build. And then the second aspect here we have on Electrostatic Mine. Defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets gives you an ionic trace. Collecting them makes you amplified. So we have another circle for jolting and ionic trace generation, and then getting re-amplified by picking up the traces. Again, we already looked up Jolt. We already know about Amplified. Blind, I don't have a ton of abilities that do. There's a build you could do the blind targets, but I don't have that on this build, so that doesn't really come into the equation. But what you need to know is that it's a bigger arc circling and feeding back into Jolt and Amplified. So those are the cornerstones of this build. Then for Fragments, the first one I have is Spark of Beacons. This is, while amplified, my special weapon final blows create blinding explosions. So the blinding that I don't have based off of that aspect does actually come into play because of my arc subclass weapon. So I can get blinding, and blinding does blind unstoppable champions and stun them. Then again, this also feeds back into amplified. The next one I have is Spark of Discharge. Arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an ionic trace. Since I am constantly focusing with an arc weapon, it's just going to give me a greater likelihood to bring in more ionic traces to keep feeding energy back into my actual abilities. And they tell you here, finally, I talked about it, but here they tell you the definition. Ionic trace: bolt of arc energy that travels along the ground, seeking towards the creator. When you pick it up, it grants ability energy. It is exactly as it sounds. Then the next one that I have is Spark of Ions. Defeating jolted targets creates an ionic trace. Since I'm constantly jolting with my pistol, I am constantly creating ionic traces. That's why you see so many of them constantly coming across the ground, and my abilities are back up. If there's enemies that can be picked off, I'm going to be creating ionic traces, and my abilities are going to be constantly fed with energy. Then the final one is Spark of Shock. My arc grenades jolt. So on top of having a good sticky grenade, it's also going to jolt, which just throws another bit of jolting into the mix. So there's a lot of different abilities in here. This is the combo that I like for this particular build. If you have this Brigand's Law, if you got the ability to craft it, take your time, work it up. It's absolutely worth it. This thing is already good on its own, but once you get Voltshot and Feeding Frenzy, it really, really does slap, especially with this build. And then I finally got my Hung Jury after years of grinding. I got it after my third Nightfall the other day. So happy to finally be able to craft the Hung Jury. Classic OG, excellent scout rifle. Sure, I could go Mida, but this is brand new to me, so I've been playing Hung Jury, even though I have an exotic slot open. So that's my build, guys. There's a lot of ways you can go about it. Honestly, it doesn't matter what your kinetic is, whatever you prefer. It doesn't matter what your power weapon is, whatever you prefer. Indeed, there's plenty of exotics you could choose to pair along with a nice arc weapon. Trinity Ghoul would work well. I really like it with Brigand's Law just because of the RPM and how nasty it hits, and it just feeds extremely well into this build. But that's the build, guys. You saw it in action. That is what I have set up, and this is one that I do highly recommend. There's alternate ways to tweak this build, and certainly separate arc builds that I have, but this is my favorite that I've put together to date. Back during the season when the Fallen Sunstar first dropped, there was an exotic fusion rifle. I forget the name of it. It was one that did a spread shot when you hip fired that created ionic traces. That I really liked when the artifact included a bunch of perks for fusions, but we don't have that in this current season, so I swapped back over to Brigand's Law, but it's still certainly a viable loadout. But frankly, with the Fallen Sunstar and the setup, you're going to be generating non-stop ionic traces, so it really doesn't matter. Whatever you prefer, just make sure you're running a well-spec'd arc subclass weapon on at least one of them. Indeed, you'll see my power weapon, Cry Mutiny. That's flame archetype, solar, so it doesn't matter. Just whatever works best for you. It's just the combination of the exotic plus the base weapon and the aspects and abilities we have tagged in it that feed your abilities and let you run around just dumping and dumping and dumping. It's a really fun one, guys. I hope you enjoyed the build. Try it out. Let me know what you think down in the comments. If you have suggestions, maybe some other things I haven't thought about or that you figured out you want to share, by all means put them in the comments. I'll test them out. I'll let you know what I think. As always, guys, I appreciate you checking in today. We will catch you on the next one.